Daf Mem Tes Amud Aleph, the top line. In the Birchos HaOretz, he says there has to be an expression of Haidah, of thanksgiving, at the beginning and the end. We start Noide, Noidelcha, V'al Kulam Hashem Elokeinu Anachnu Moedim Lach. We give thanksgiving at the beginning, at the end. But you certainly should not do less than one. At least one has to be said. If you do not even one, that's Meguna. If you conclude the bracha that Hashem is the one that gives out, apportions the lands to all the nations, and if he concludes the bracha in B'nai Yisrael with Umashi Yisrael, he saves Yisrael, he's bur. Because that's not the appropriate bracha. It's not appropriate for those brachas. When on those brachas we talk specifically about that an Oretz, that Hashem gave the land to Eretz Yisrael, even though he gave the land to everybody, but the specific brachas that he gave to Eretz Yisrael. And B'nai Yisrael is talking about the binyan of Yerushalayim and not Moshe Yisrael, even though it's absolutely praiseworthy and we thank Hashem, but that's not the appropriate place. If he doesn't mention the bris Mila and Torah in Birchos HaOretz and Malchus based Dovid by Yerushalayim lo yotzi dei chayv, then he's not yotzi the chiyuv. Messiah le Ravila, the Amar Ravila, Amar Yaakov Barach Hav Mishum Rabbeinu Kol Shelo Yamer Bris v'Torah v'Birchos HaOretz uMalchus based Dovid by Yerushalayim lo yotzi dei chayv. He's not Yotze, he must mention those in those appropriate places. Pligi ba ava Yosi ben Dustoy v'Rabbanan chad amar atayva meitiv tzara tzricha malchus. One says the bracha of a tayva meitiv, the fourth bracha, it has to have malchus baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam. It has to have the expression of melech, that Hashem is the king. The other one says it does not require the mentioning of Melech of Malchus. What's the explanation? What's the Hezber Man? Malchus, the one that says you have to mention Malchus, Kasavar the Rabbanan. He holds that the bracha of a Taiva Meitiv is the Rabbanan. Therefore, it's not considered a bracha Smucha L'Chaverta. It's not connected to the previous bracha. And therefore, since it's not connected to the previous bracha, therefore, it has to be a standalone bracha. And a bracha, to be a valid bracha, it has to have Shem Umalchus. This mandam has to have Shem Umalchus. So you need Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam. It's not connected to the previous bracha because it's independent. It was added on later. So it has to be its own bracha, and to be a valid bracha, it has to be Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam. Uman Damar Ein Tzricha Malchus, the one who holds that you do not have to mention Melech. Kasavar Daraisa, he holds that it is Daraisa. Therefore, it's connected to the previous bracha, and therefore, since it's connected, you don't need to mention Melech because it's connected to the previous bracha. Now Rashi asks the question, if it's a bracha as Kasavar Daraisa and as a bracha Smucha Chaverta, well, why does it start with the Baruch? It's only the machloikus is, do you have to mention Melech? But Baruch Atah Hashem, both of them hold that you have to mention. So if he holds that it's a deraisa and it's smucha l'chaverta, why does it even start with a bracha? Rashi answers, because this baruch is really considered the bracha of the chasima, of the conclusion, meaning it's one expression of baruch, just like we have a bracha of bori pri oetz, bori pri adoma. There's one baruch, one bracha for the beginning and the end. Here also, it's considered bracha smucha l'chaverta, but you still need a bracha of Baruch Atah Hashem to serve as the concluding bracha, because otherwise there's no concluding bracha, and it's mentioned at the beginning because this is considered one short form expression of thanks. Now, even though it's really a longer bracha, but as we saw from Taisus earlier, there were later on additional expressions that were added onto it. But it's initially considered one expression of thanksgiving. It's one concept. It might be a little longer, but it's one concept, so it's considered a brach tzara, and therefore one baruch satisfies both the psicha and the chasima. And that's what Rashi holds. Rabbi Kiva asks on it that we learned previously that we learned previously that Teida, I'll bring you a raya, that Toiva Meitiv is a Derabonon because it's Pesach Beborach. Now, it's Pesach Beborach. It doesn't say Melech, Pesach Beborach, and that's a proof that it's a Derabonon. And here we're saying, according to Rashi, that even the Mandamer holds as a Doraisa, but you still would start with Baruch, because the Baruch really serves as the Chasima, so it's difficult. Sorachian, Rabbi Kiver applies Sorachian from the Gemara before, that it's not mashma that way at all. Tan Rabbanon, Ma'u Chaisem, what are the Chasim, the concluding brachas, but Ben Yerushalayim, and Ben Yerushalayim, what's the Chasima? Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer, Moshe Yisrael. He says, the one who saves Yisrael. Moshe Yisrael in Ben Yerushalayim, Loi, the brachas Ben Yerushalayim. So you only mention about saving Yisrael, not Ben Yerushalayim. Ela ema av Moshe Yisrael. He meant to say also Moshe Yisrael. Rabba Barav Huna Iklabei Reish Galusa Pasuk Bechada V'Sim Batata. He started with one expression with Yerushalayim, but he's Messiah with both Moshe Yisrael and Yerushalayim. Amar Rav Chisda Gevurta Levechta Batata. I think it's a great thing to conclude with two expressions. It said a Gvurtal Mechaber Tarta with two things. Rabbi says you do not conclude with two concepts. As we'll see shortly in the Gemara, it's improper to have two expressions in the bracha. Each concept should have its own bracha. Here you're bundling together two different ideas. It's not appropriate. So therefore, you should not be chaysem with both of them. It should be Yerushalayim and not Moshe Yisrael. Gufa, Rabbi you don't conclude with two concepts, with two expressions. What do you mean? I'll show you. There's situations where we do. It says, we make the bracha, we conclude the bracha, seemingly those are two concepts. My answer is no, it's really one idea. Eretz the mafkim mazan. It really means is the land that produces the mazan. It's the land that produces the mazon, so it's really one expression of praising the land. We say Ala Aretz Vala is in Me'in Sholish. We also seem to have two expressions: Ala Aretz, the land, and the fruit. No, here also the Gemara says what it means is it's one idea. Ala Aretz, the Mafke Paris, the land that produces the fruit. Kadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim. On Yontiv, we make the bracha, that's the chasima. It seems to be two expressions. It's Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim. Moranach is Yisrael the Kachinu l'Zmanim. It's really one. It's Yisrael that are Mekadesh l'Zmanim. They sanctify it. It requires Bezdin to establish the Luach, the month, the new month, and to establish the Bezdin, to establish the Moyed, and it's Bezdin that it's Mekadesh, the Moyed. It doesn't come automatically like Shabbos. It requires Yisrael to do it, so it's really one expression. And what about Rosh Chodesh? We say Mekadesh Yisrael Rosh Chadoshim. No, the Gemara answers also it's not two. It's Yisrael the Kachina Rosh Chadoshim. It's Yisrael who Mekadesh Rosh Chodesh. Bezin has to be Mekadesh the Chodesh, so it's really one idea. What about Mekadesh HaShabbos Yisrael v'Hazmanim? What about when Yontiv and Shabbos Yontiv falls out on Shabbos, and we say Shabbos Yisrael v'Hazmanim? Shabbos is clearly separate, isn't it? Because it's not through the Kiddush of Yisrael, so you have Mekadesh Shabbos v'Yisrael v'Hazmanim, so that seems to be more than one chasima. More answers chutz mizu. This is an exception. Umayshna. Well, why do we differentiate? Meaning, there has to be some reason, some valid reason why we say over here that even though it is somewhat like two chasimas, but there is a common denominator which differentiates it from a true double expression. Umayshno. More answers hachachadihi. Really, over here it's one. We give thanks to Hashem that gives us this kiddush, that gives us these holy times. He gives us Shabbos, which is Kodesh, and Yontiv. Yontiv is through Yisrael, through Bezdin. But the essential, the primary idea is thanking Hashem for giving us this Kedusha, these holy times, these special times, these Kedusha. We're thanking Hashem for this Kedusha. We incidentally mentioned that Yontiv is through Yisrael, but it's one expression, so therefore it can be combined. Awesome, Tarati, but over there, Yerushalayim, and Yisrael are different expressions. One is Yerushalayim and one is Klal Yisrael. So that's two different chasimas. We're not chaysim betati. Chasam tati kol chad echad ba'pei nafshe. Each one is independent. V'tayim amai. So we had this whole discussion that we don't have two chasimas. V'tayim amai and chaysim b'shnayim. Why is that? So that we don't conclude with two expressions. Because we don't do mitzvahs bundles. We don't want to make it like we'll pack it in, make a bundle, try to get it done as soon as possible. Each one has to have its own chasima. We don't try to, so to speak, do it wholesale. That would be considered a bizayon for the mitzvah. What's the maskana? If he starts with the bracha mentioning about Yisrael, then he concludes with Yisrael as well. But if he's only paisech with Yishalayim, he's only chayesem with Yishalayim. Rav Nachman says no. Even if he started with Rachim, the way we do chayesem b'baynu Yishalayim, you still are chayesem with baynu Yishalayim. Mishum shenemar baynu Yishalayim Hashem nidcha Yisrael yechanais. They're intertwined. You end up with Yerushalayim, and that inherent in that is the salvation of Yisrael, because it says B'nai Yerushalayim Hashem nidcha Yisrael yichanis eimase B'nai Yerushalayim Hashem. When will that B'nai Yerushalayim happen? B'zman shenidcha Yisrael yichanis, when there's a kibbutz golios. So it's part and parcel of the same concept. Amalei Rabbi Zera Rav Chisda Neisim Marvinisne. He said, let's learn Gemara together. Amalei said to him, I didn't even learn benching. You want me to learn now Gemara? Amalei, hi, what do you mean? You don't know benching? What are you referring to? Amalei, because I'll tell you this, I was by the Reish Galusa, and I benched for the oilam, for the tzibur, and Rav Sheshes like straightened his neck like he was going to attack me like a snake. He was so upset with the way I benched. V'amai, why was he upset? Because I did not mention any of these expressions, not bris, not Torah, not malchus. V'amai lo yamrad, why did you not mention it? Because I said I followed the shita of Rav Chanan Olam Harav. Damar Rav Chanan Olam Harav lo yamar bris v'Torah malchus yotze. If you're not mentioning, you're yaitz. Bris lefi sheina b'noshim. It's not applicable to women. So therefore, the way the Rishonim understand and speak it out is that it's true. Why did he follow this das yach, this opinion? Because there's a valid reason for it, because benching should be consistent with all those who bench. It should be one nusach, and since it's not applicable to women and avodim, so he used a nusach, a standardized type of nusach, that would be applicable to all. So he asked, it's true that there's opinion of Rav, and it's true, as we know, that Rav is a Tano Poleg, but still, you all these opinions that we mentioned before, and you only follow the Das Yachid of Rav, you should not have followed that Das Yachid, so you were incorrect in the way you benched. You have to mention the Baruch of Toiv Meit Melech Hoylom. My Kamashlam, what's the Chiddush? Called Bracha Shem B'Malchus Leishmei Bracha. Is that the Chiddush you're teaching me, that any bracha that doesn't have the name, the expression of Melech Malchus is not a bracha? V'Hamar Rav Yechon Chad Zimna. You already taught us that once. Hamar Rav Zera. So V'Hamar Rav Yechon Zimna. Hamar Rav Zera. Rav Zera says Loimar Shetzricha Shtei Malchus. What he means to teach us is you need two expressions of Malchus. Chada Dido. One for the bracha itself of a Taiva Meitiv. Chada the B'nai Yerushalayim. And one for the melech that's missing in the bracha of B'nai Yerushalayim. Therefore, if that's the case, you should really need three chadadida, one for itself, type of native chadad B'nai Yerushalayim, and chadad the Berachos Haaretz, because in the Berachos Haaretz it also doesn't mention melech. Ella, what do you say? Berachos Haaretz, my time Eloi. Why is there no mention over there? Berachos Haaretz mishum dahavle brachos much laverta, because it's samach to the bracha of Azan, so it's not necessary. It's a B'nai Yerushalayim nami loy tiboya, so it also should not be required. Did I have la bracha smuchel chaverta? It's also bracha smuchel chaverta. So why do you need say that now we have to add on this extra mention of melech and a type of metiv to compensate for Bnei Yerushalayim? It's not necessary. It's smuchel chaverta. The more says who din da fil Bnei Yerushalayim nami loitim boy. Really, meikra din of Bnei Yerushalayim. It's also not necessary. Dovid. But since we're mentioning in this bracha of Yerushalayim Malchus Beis David, which is necessary, David HaMelech was going to the Yerushalayim, we have to mention David HaMelech, then Lav Urach Harad, Layamr Malchus Shemayim. If you mention the Malchus of Beis David, it's not proper not to mention Malchus Shemayim. That's why we add on the second one. Rapapa Amar Haki Kamar. No, he says this is what it meant. When he said two, he didn't mean two in total. He meant two additional ones. He meant one for the one it's on its own for Hatayv Meitiv, one to compensate for Yerushalayim, Hamelech Hatayv, and another one to compensate. We do compensate for the missing Melech that's in the Birchas Haaretz. Hamelech Hatayv, Meitiv Lakol. So we have three expressions, and really it's one for itself and the other two to compensate for the other two brachas. Yosef, Rabbi Zerah, Rabbi Gidel, Yosef, Rabbi Gidel, Kami, the Rav, Rabbi Yosef, Kama, Tov, Lo Yizkar Shel Shabbos. But let's say he did not mention with Shabbos, he did not mention Ritzei. And he already said, Bnei Yerushalayim, Omer Baruch Shenosim Shabbos L'Menucha L'Am Yisrael Ba'ava. This is the nusach that he says, that Baruch, that he gave Shabbos L'Am Yisrael Ba'ava L'Oyis, it should be a Oyis L'Bris, Baruch Mekadosh Shabbos. Baruch Mekadosh Shabbos. So he says this bracha, and this is the nusach that he says to replace if he missed out Ritzei. Taisus mentions why he asks the question, why do you start with the Baruch over here? Isn't it a Smucha L'Chaverta? Isn't it a bracha Smucha L'Chaverta? He says that it's not considered Smucha L'Chaverta because since it's generally not said, it's not fixed and established in that place. It's not called Smucha L'Chaverta. Bracha Smucha L'Chaverta, which does not require a Baruch, is if that's where its place is, this is the sequence, and it's connected to the previous bracha, you don't need a bracha. But here, generally speaking, it's not said over here. It's not said, so therefore we have to insert the baruch. Amrle Mana Amra, who told you this? Rav. Rav said, he forgot to say Yalaviyava Yantiv Omer Baruch Shanasan Yom Tovim Lamo Yisrael Simcha L'Zikaron Baruch Mekadosh Yisrael Vazmanim. This is the nusach that he said. Amrle Man Amra, who said this? Rav. If he forgot to say on Rosh Chodesh Yalaviyavai and it's benching, and he already said Bnei Yerushalayim, Omer Baruch Shanasan Rashi Chadashim Lamo Yisrael Zikaron. He says Rashi Chadashim L'Am Yisrael Zikaron. Now, as opposed to the previous bracha by Yontiv, where he said over there Shanasan Yom Tov L'Am Yisrael L'Simcha L'Zikaron, here it just says Zikaron. So V'lo Yadani Yamar Bas Simcha Oiloi, but I'm not sure if he added in Rosh Chodesh the word Simcha like he did in Rosh Chodesh. V'lo Yadani Yamar Bas Simcha Eloi Yamar Bas Simcha. And I don't know if he was chaysim just like he was before, and he ended off with a baruch by Yontiv. When he started off, he said that baruch shenasan Yom Tov L'Am Yisrael. Then he ended up baruch. The question is over here: did he add simcha, and did he start and end with a baruch? And either Rav Gidel Bar Minyum, either Rabbi rather, either Rabbi. So the way the Rishonim speak out over here, they're interconnected. If he said simcha, so it becomes somewhat of a longer form bracha than like on Yontiv. You start with a baruch and you end with a baruch because it's a longer form of bracha. If there's no simcha, it's like a Birchos of Paris. It's one expression, so you do not end with a baruch. It's only starting and not ending. And so they're interconnected, so I don't know if simcha was mentioned and an additional baruch or not.